Welcome to High Yield Strategies for Creating a Safe, Respectful, and Inclusive Classroom. I am Kim Davis from Western Carolina University.
Hi, everybody. I am Sandy Corbett, and I'm from East Carolina University. So on the far east part of the state, the exact opposite of Kim. Today, what we would love for you to do is we would love for you to go ahead and type in this bit.ly. It is case sensitive. This is going to be your working document for today where you can take notes, and we've included links to videos and other resources that we're going to share throughout our presentation.
We just wanted to share that we are a part of the North Carolina New Teacher Support Program. That program serves 1,300 beginning teachers, 200 schools in 40 school districts across North Carolina. And Sandy and I are instructional coaches in that program. As I said, I work at Western Carolina and Sandy works at ECU.
All right, so again, North Carolina beginning teachers that are viewing, we would like to welcome you to our session. Please let's remember to work together, do our best, and learn as much as we can while we respect and support each other through the challenges. And without further ado, let's do this.
All right, these are the two professional teaching standards that we will be including in our session today. And you will become very familiar with the standards as you become a teacher. And you'll notice we have a little squiggle here with a read more, and that just means that you can hop over to that hyperdoc and you can get more information about whatever's on the slide that we have. And we hope that you check out and enjoy all those extra resources.
All right. So our session outcomes today, you, the participant, will examine and reflect on classroom management plans and learn strategies for implementing a safe and respectful, inclusive classroom while maintaining high expectations that will ultimately impact student learning.
So this African proverb, I am because we are, and it all starts with us as teachers, as coaches, as lead learners. And we just want to emphasize today throughout this session that we set the stage for the learning in our classroom. And it is important for us to create a safe, inclusive, and respectful learning environment. And that's why we chose this quote to share. And I also wanted to quote Zaretta Hammond, who wrote Culturally Responsive Teaching. And she says that it is all about building the learning capacity of every individual student. So throughout this session, I want you to really focus and listen for all of those moments where we talk about how important it is to recognize each of your students as individual and what they bring to your classroom, to your learning, and all the amazing things they're going to do for you. You can hit pause here and read this slide. I first saw this at an Amy Dean conference. She's called the Behavior Queen, and there is a link in the hyperdoc with all kinds of cool free resources from her. But this kind of sets the stage that it is really important that you teach the procedures and the classroom management plan that is going to create that safe, respectful, and inclusive classroom. So we just want to focus on the fact that you do have to teach it, that we don't come with all of the things that we know to do, even in our secondary classrooms. And the other thing we want you to focus on and pay attention to is how important it is to stay curious as a teacher. It's really important that you don't go immediately to things and take them personally. And it's hard not to do that sometimes. And Sandy and I have lots of stories where when we were in the classroom and then as we work with beginning teachers, the story I want to tell you to kind of help you think about that is not too long ago, I had a teacher whose student went home and told the mom that my teacher said he was worthless. And she got called to the principal's office to find out what happened. Of course, she did not say that, but what did happen is that student was in a group, not working. and she had tried to redirect twice and he did not do it. So she said, go back to your seat. So in that moment, she did not stay curious. She took it personal that the student was not following the directions, was not doing what she asked to do, was not enjoying the lesson. And we had just a real conversation about reflection and what had happened. And the result of that was, this personal attack on her. And, of course, she did not say that, but she could have stayed curious and she could have talked to the student about what was going on and why he wasn't doing the work. And maybe that whole thing could have been avoided. The Read More is a resource from Jennifer Gonzalez, who has a website and podcast called Cult of Pedagogy. And in that resource, she has 10 things that can sabotage your classroom management plan. And number 10 is it is not personal. Students don't come to school to make your life miserable or any of those things. So staying curious is about paying attention to each individual student. So just always stay curious when you're talking to your students.
All right. So when we think about you and your students, we or you and they are not the same. Remember that your students were not raised the way you were, and then students within the classroom are all raised differently as well. So what really defines or who decides when what is disrespectful? As you can see, we have a couple of different maybe things that people do that one might say is disrespectful, where another person might not, it may not faze them at all, like walking away while someone is speaking to you, or staying silent when an adult is speaking to a child. So a couple things, instead of saying something like, you're being disrespectful, you could say, I feel disrespected when. So you're allowing the student to know, hey, that behavior is not really desired, and explain what maybe did that made you feel that certain way. Instead of saying, you know the rule, why are you wearing a hat in the building? Like Kim said, be curious. Say something like, tell me about your hat. And then allow them the opportunity to share. And oftentimes they may have just simply forgotten that it was on their head. And so they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, and take it off. No big deal. And you can move on. Remember that your secondary students, they're only teenagers, and we cannot expect them to act like they're 25 years old. We have to remember that the brain is not fully developed until about the age of 25. So dealing with feelings and emotions and all that good stuff, it is a challenge sometimes for those young people. Remember, again, the students aren't raised the way that you are. I'll give you an example of something that maybe you could think about. If a student walks away from you while you're speaking with them, don't be so quick to get upset, because they may have been taught by an adult, their parent, or someone else, that if they're getting upset, that they should turn around and walk away before they say something they would regret, or something that may just simply hurt someone else. Allow for another opportunity to come up where you do kind of through inquiry check in with that student and make sure they're okay, and let them know that you did not in any way mean to upset them. Maybe even apologize for however they may have begin to feel. You could also say something like, hey, you're not in trouble. Could you hang back for a sec just so we could chat? And just, again, be inquisitive, be curious, and make sure that students know that you do care. We've included on the HyperDoc a video of a gentleman named Mr. Gomez, and he's addressing a student who has entered the class with a hat on. And his take on it is very interesting, and I think that you will really like that.
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, check out that video in the HyperDoc. Let's see. So I love a good checklist and teachers in general love good checklists. And so I'm just going to kind of hop over and show you this link that's in the HyperDoc. And what I've done is, with the help of a colleague, is kind of think about all of the classroom management rules and procedures that you might want to consider establishing in your classroom. and they're kind of by category. And this is going to make a copy for you so that you can edit and change as you need to. And it's also kind of a working document because a lot of classroom management issues kind of wrap around procedures where students forget or not forget, kind of like the hat thing where Sandy says sometimes they just forget they have it on. So we don't want to, kind of react and explode and take it personally, like, I can't believe you're wearing a hat in my classroom, but just stay curious and say, hey, hat on, or hand signal. But this checklist is awesome. And you can just go through and look at all the different things that can happen in a classroom and how to teach those. I say be crazy consistent is what I tell my teachers, especially in those first 6 or 9 weeks of school, where you're establishing all of those procedures and how we roll. And it's just really important that that you don't take it personally. I have another quick story about a student who asked to go to the back table to plug in his laptop. He forgot his charger. And the teacher kind of just lost her mind in that moment. And I don't know if something else had been happening, but she got really upset. There was like yelling. And so finally, of course, the student was allowed to come back to the back table because he couldn't do his work without plugging in. I happened to be at the table, and when he came back to sit down, I just looked at him and said, hello. I said, is it okay if I stay here? Would you like me to move? He goes, man, he said, I had to take my little sister to school today because my mom was sick and I left my charger in the car. And he just dropped his head and just started working. And that's why we really want to focus on those individual students, student needs, and then to stay curious. So instead of exploding about the charger or whatever it is that's, sets us off, we want to stay curious. Sandy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I completely agree with Kim. I think it's important that we do take a moment sometimes and really think about our kids and think about what they may be going through before we jump to conclusions. And sometimes that's hard to do when you're in the moment, but if it's part of your daily kind of attitude and your daily routine, it will become more natural. So with expectations, we want to make sure that them rules, because that's kind of a negative, has a negative feel to it. We want to call them expectations. You could call them anything you want. But we want to make sure that all of them are positive. So I have here a couple of examples, and these are all on the secondary level. If you'll take note, the very first one is actually an example of 4 expectations that a teacher that I served last year used in her classroom, and all of them are very positive. So being emotionally and physically safe and having empathy, dare greatly. And of course, because they are a little bit vague, right? She went through and made sure that students completely understood what she meant by each one. The other 2 examples I really like because they're also very positive in their wording. Do your best, take a breath. And that again is for everyone, right? We all need that moment just to take a breath, being positive and mindful with our words. And I really like this last one, the high five. Like Kim just mentioned a moment ago about using our hands for a signal of some sort. So once we go through and teach our students what these expectations are and explain different maybe scenarios with them, we can then identify in the classroom. I love that everyone is completing number 1 on our expectations. So meaning, or the kids could actually, once it becomes kind of common knowledge, the kids could even say, hey, Miss Davis, you're doing number 1, or you're doing number 3, or whatever it may be. So the kids can have a lot of ownership in this type of classroom expectation management situation. Kim, do you have anything you want to add?
I just want to say how much I love these examples for secondary teachers. It just sets a high expectation for every single student in the class. So I love that.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about some more positive strategies for the classroom. And I think that it skipped a slide. Did it skip a slide? There we go. So I kind of want you to think about these kind of like a first, next, then situation. So let's imagine that we're in our classroom and just kind of that first one is skim and scan the room. We want to be kind of like a lifeguard in the classroom, kind of skimming and scanning all the time. And what Sandy and I were talking about the other day was that sometimes we see teachers at all levels of experience where, and I did this too. We get so engrossed and excited in the conversation we're having with a group of students or a single student that all of a sudden everything else just kind of disappears in the classroom. And we're so excited and we're just like into this conversation or discussion we're having. And we kind of forget about all the other students in our classroom. And that can be not a good thing. So you want to, even when you're talking with students, you want to look up, scan the room, look back down. And what I love about the slide just before that Sandy shared is you can kind of hold up like a number 2, like get back engaged. If you have taught that procedure, and I see hand signals a lot in classrooms. I hear like go words, like a phrase that teachers say that reminds students to get back on task. I've seen this before, right? So skim and scan the room. The next one is to sit beside, to stand low to support students. So this teacher is kind of standing with the students, kind of helping them out instead of coming up face to face in like a confrontational kind of thing. I call it stand low because you're going to walk over to the desk. If you've got a student, let's talk about cell phones. Walk over to the student and then like squat down or crouch down and then just say, is everything okay? Stay curious with the student. Is everything okay? They've got their phone out and they are not putting it away. You might find out that there might be something going on at home or with somebody else and they need to get on their phone. And so then you can give them permission to step out in the hallway and make a call or text or whatever. So we don't want to stand over the student and come up over them. And then of course, we're going to have situations where we might have to have a private conversation where no one else can hear and be respectful. And so what Sandy said earlier was kind of preface that kind of private conversation with "you're not in trouble. I just have a quick question. Could you step over here?" I don't encourage teachers to send kids out in the hall because that feels just very like high level of punishment. But sometimes you can say, could you hang back after class? Or can you walk over to my desk or over to the side of the room where you can have a private conversation and redirect? Also in the HyperDoc is another Jennifer Gonzalez resource where she actually, I think it's an Edutopia article where it talks about how to talk to those students in that private conversation. So we've given you some resources. Again, keep your individual students in mind and stay curious. A few other things that we kind of brainstormed that we tend to share with a lot of teachers every single year is to support student created word walls. Sandy said in her area of the state, they call them power words. You might use academic vocabulary or just vocab, but make it fun by letting the students put the words up. And then I've seen a lot of teachers over the years actually tally mark when those words are shared. And then they have like a class like incentive, like a walk the track or outside time, or, everybody can chew gum, or I don't know, any of those kind of those kind of fun things. But those are all things that create that culture of learning, right? Where everyone is included. Post-it note campaign is where you are, post-it notes in your pocket or at your desk, quick and easy. Jot down some notes, recognizing student work, student thinking, student process. Try to be really specific. Like, I love your thesis statement. I love the way you solve that multi-step math problem. Thank you for your lab safety, those kinds of things. Post-it note campaign. all good, especially in the beginning. And then you can use those Post-it notes as a redirection. If you don't want to say something out loud, you can jot it on the Post-it note, put it on the desk upside down so the student doesn't have to share and no one else can see, and you don't have to yell out. I love that. And this week we did lose Spencer Silver, who was the chemist who developed the adhesive for Post-it notes. And so we've linked a great article if you are a science teacher or an ELA teacher, and you can read all about Arthur Fry and Spencer Silver, who gave us the Post-it notes. The other thing that Sandy and I really encourage are positive phone calls home in the first 4 to 6 weeks. Would you say, Sandy?
Yeah.
Or an email home. And I know it seems like a lot. You know, I taught 125 to 130 students when I taught middle school, and that's a lot of phone calls or emails, but it's great if the first call that you make is positive, so that when you do have to make that second phone call home because of a situation, they've already talked to you and you've already got kind of that connection. We also shared in the HyperDoc different ways to gamify your lessons. Those resources are from the Regional Teacher of the Year in 2019, Cesar Campana, and he is an amazing secondary teacher out in my part of the world. And then Classcraft is a classroom management system that is gamified. And there's a video there that you can watch and kind of learn a little bit about that. All right, Sandy, you ready?
Yeah. So we're going to take a look at an example of a teacher classroom and some of the different things that she does in her classroom. And I'm going to ask a couple questions. In your HyperDoc, you will notice that there are more questions than just the ones I'm going to ask. The ones I'm asking are in bold. And I encourage you to watch this video all the way through, because you're going to see so much more and it'll be more in context. But take some time and look at those questions and see if you can answer them. And by observing some other teacher, you might get some ideas of how to better do something. So we're going to first start with Kim, if you will go to 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Exactly, the colorful chart.
I like highlight the image categorized.
That's what I'm talking about, Kaylee. So you're going to use these and be mindful. Look at the board. Isn't it the same wording as right here? All right, so what I'm trying to do is make sure you connect what we did yesterday to what we're going to do today. So you got to use all of these to come up with your theme. So if I come back, you have something for me? You will? I believe you, Katie. I believe you. I believe you.
Okay, you can pause there, Kim. Okay, so with that little clip, there was something that I noticed that the camera did. It kind of scanned the room. So you got to see 3 different tables of students. And this was right after she kind of unleashed them. She had given instructions, they'd gone over what they were going to do. And what I noticed when I viewed this, every single table of students seemed as though they were immediately kind of on task. So Kim, what do you think likely contributes to that desired behavior?
Yeah, I think the first thing that really stood out to me is that she has clear expectations, high expectations, and procedures for all the students. I was also thinking about the lesson plan. It was, all the students were looking at the board. You'll see in the beginning of the video, she kind of has the questions all written out, all prepared for the students. So that really stood out to me, that they are engaged and listening, and the groups clearly have like their procedures set up. Yeah, very good.
I completely agree. Go ahead and move to 7 minutes and 11 seconds.
Find a trash can.
All right. Back it up just a little bit. I'm sorry, Kim. Make that about 7 minutes even.
Yeah, I think we saw what was happening there.
Okay. What are the statistics? Take me to them.
Women compromise more than half the world's population.
All right, I'm having a little video issue here. Hold on just a second.
Okay,
7, tell me again.
just 7 minutes even.
All right, and we're gonna actually see, aren't we gonna see her redirect a student? Is that right, Sandy?
Yeah, so she's sitting with a group and something happens kind of in the middle of the conversation where she does redirect a student. So see what you think about it. How does it make you feel?
She's describing.
She's describing the problems that women are facing. All right. What's the second part of this? How did you come to that conclusion? Adam, is that gum in your mouth? Find a trash can. All right.
Okay,
How'd you come up with it?
you can pause it there. Okay, so as we saw, and as I mentioned, in the middle of working with this group, kind of directing them where she wants them to go, she does kind of call a kid out in front of the rest of the group about gum in his mouth. And although this is something that you may, maybe a rule that is in your building, or it's just a rule in your classroom, how could she possibly have handled that differently, Kim?
Yeah, the other thing I noticed that I hadn't noticed when I watched it before, Sandy, was that he is actually answering her questions. Like as she's talking to the group, he's actually very engaged in the assignment. I was also thinking about, but from watching the other part of the video, she has really strong relationships with her students.
She
And
does.
yes, she does. And so it may be likely that, that might, they might have a connection, and that, he didn't feel weird at all about that. But if you call a student out like that in a group with his peers, and he may or may not have a good relationship with those classmates, it could be embarrassing, I guess is that's what came up for me. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that it could be embarrassing, just because he's being called out. But the other thing is, like you mentioned, he's the kid that's answering the questions. It could shut him down completely, lose his train of thought, then he can't answer the question. So I feel like if she had, as you mentioned earlier in one of the slides, kind of after she had finished with the group, as she gets up, she kind of goes behind him and crouches down and says, "Hey, you need to spit that gum out," right? And it would not have probably been what it was, right? They would have stayed on task. There would not have been an interruption. So although she is being, it seems very consistent and fair, there's no reason she would have called him out over someone else. Maybe the way she called him out could have been different.
Yeah.
All right, the very last one, if we could go to 10 minutes and 38 seconds or close to that.
Shelby, you can have orange. Here's blue. Someone had a question, and I forget who it was. Truck, you had a question. All right. Everybody received a marker. Did you all get a marker? You got black and brown. You choose. All right.
All right, you can pause there. Okay, so she says, someone had a question, but I forgot who it was. And the student then responds, "Oh, it was me." This is absolutely great, because what she's doing is that not only is she affirming that someone had a question in the room and that is important to her, but also that it's okay to like make a mistake and forget like who it was that had asked her or said, "Hey, I have a question." It shows she's human. She's not perfect, just like everybody else. And it kind of creates this kind of classroom culture that it is okay to make a mistake. We're all here to learn. And she's being just as vulnerable as the students are. So I really, really liked that. I think it's important that we don't forget that we are human and so are they. So mistakes are all right. Okay.
Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, that's really good. I certainly am definitely not perfect. Yeah.
Right. So as Kim gets to this next slide has a video. We are not going to play it for you, but it is linked into your HyperDoc, and it is a video. It's an exemplar, and it's this teacher named Mr. Hester, and he kind of provides some insight both through the video and a couple of his comments, of what he feels are best practices for like week 1 and day 1 of classroom management. What we've also included in the hyperdoc is week 1, day 2 and week 1, day 3, as well as a video where he kind of scans the room and lets you see the classroom, like a classroom tour of different things that are incorporated within his classroom management style.
Yeah, that's great. And that we mentioned Mr. Gomez earlier. So these 3 teachers are all just amazing examples, just glimpses into the classroom. So I love that Mr. Hester and Mr. Gomez, those are first day videos, because we all, that first day jitters, so I love that you guys have access to watch that.
And Kim, before we move on, I wanted to say one thing. So I hope you can kind of get the gist here that watching other teachers can help us see things. I would highly encourage you, as you start your year, if you can find the time to just go observe someone on your hall or another hallway to get some ideas. It may not even be the same content area, but you are going to learn so much about what works and what doesn't. So just that's my encouragement piece there. Just go visit and observe other teachers.
Yeah, definitely, Sandy. Take advantage of those planning periods, 1 day a week, ask permission. It'll also help you to kind of stay connected with the other colleagues. Yeah. All right. So we're going to wrap up with kind of just Sandy and I brainstormed just some ideas about things that we felt like would be helpful in building positive relationships in the very first few days. And I know that there's 1,000 things you could do. I can't say enough about surveys. I did a lot of surveys beginning of the year, end of course, or end of semester, depending on your schedule in your school. And that link takes you to an example, and you can tweak that however you want, but you can really get a glimpse into students and interest that way. Kylie Schwartz is a teacher in Denver who wrote a book called I Wish My Teacher Knew. She was actually an elementary school teacher, but watch that video, that news story, and then the link for the secondary students. I think it really, for me, it really highlights all of the individual students that you may work with and teach and how different their needs are. And I just can't say enough about how important it is to see every single student in your class as an individual student and avoid things like, well, they always, or those kids, or that group. I just really want you to see each student, look in their eyes and know them. The next one is a really cool activity to do on the first day of school for secondary teachers. It kind of helps the students get into your curriculum, your standards. It's a neat idea, and it's fairly generic as far as content. So most everybody should be able to find it helpful. I always have my beginning teachers do roster concentration sometime around the 6th week of school. And that's where you take your student roster and you write things that you've learned about all of your students that are not academic. So get to know your students. That's your challenge. Be sure, even if you have curriculum that you've been given and required to teach, make sure that the topics and the projects that you do represent your individual students. We also want you to post student work, kudo board, scavenger hunts. I listened to the North Carolina Beginning Teacher of the Year this week, Sandy, and she is from Western North Carolina. And she teaches in an alternative school, and she shared about how the first year she did like the PowerPoint of herself, that like, this is who I am, this is where I went to college. And she said her kids were just like, they didn't really get into it. So the second year she put items around her classroom that kind of represent who she is and her interests. And the students kind of walked around, and then they kind of guessed at why she had that object in her classroom. And she said it was really cool because then the students connected with their own interest. And she said it was just really neat. She was able to share about herself, but also make those connections. And then the Remind app is just like awesome, and we should all use the Remind app. All right.
So, as we kind of come to a close today, we wanted to share one of our favorite quotes with you. You may have heard this before, but tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember, but involve me and I learn. And that is by Benjamin Franklin. And as you guys move forward through this summit, as well as the beginning of a new school year, we hope that you guys will keep this quote in mind. Involving students is so important in the learning process.
Thank you. I love that. We are here to serve and help all teachers, especially beginning teachers. So feel free to get in touch with us. Here is our email address, our Twitter. You can send us a message either way. We would love to hear from you and hear feedback from you if you would like to reach out. Thank you so much for your time today and for tuning in to our session.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And we hope you guys have a great start to your year with all the new things that you're learning.